The most painful moment at the party was not when people ignored the single mother standing alone near the wall. It was when someone quietly asked if she had come without an invitation, as if loneliness itself made her suspicious. Daniel Carter heard the comment from across the room and saw the hurt flash across the woman's face before she quickly hid it. Most people returned to their conversations. Daniel did not. The community fundraiser was being held inside a renovated event hall beside a church parking lot on the edge of town. Parents, local business owners, teachers, and volunteers filled the room. Daniel had only attended because his 12-year-old son, Noah, had convinced him to come. After spending all week balancing repair jobs, school responsibilities, and overdue paperwork, social events were usually the last thing Daniel wanted. His aging pickup truck sat beneath a street lamp outside while a stack of unopened mail remained on the passenger seat. Yet Noah had argued that sometimes people needed community just as much as they needed work. Daniel suspected his son might be wiser than most adults. Across the room stood the woman everyone seemed to overlook. Emily Parker wore a simple navy dress and held a paper cup of punch she barely touched. She smiled politely whenever someone approached, but most conversations ended quickly. A few people seemed uncomfortable around her. Others appeared unsure what to say. Daniel noticed something else. Several attendees were chatting easily with couples or groups, while Emily's young daughter sat alone at a nearby table coloring quietly. The sight bothered him more than he could explain. Children always revealed the truth adults tried to hide. Without making a scene, Daniel crossed the room. He never approached Emily directly. Instead, he walked to her daughter first. "That looks better than anything I could draw," he said, nodding toward the picture. The little girl smiled immediately. Within minutes, Noah joined them. Soon the two children were comparing drawings and laughing about which superhero would survive a zombie invasion. Only then did Daniel glance toward Emily and offer a simple smile. No grand gesture. No awkward introduction. Just an invitation that allowed her daughter to feel included. For the first time that evening, Emily seemed able to breathe. An hour later, as the event continued, Daniel quietly helped stack chairs after a volunteer slipped away unexpectedly. He repaired a loose electrical connection behind a refreshment station before anyone noticed there was a problem. Then he returned to helping Noah gather donated supplies. He never mentioned any of it. Yet several people began watching him with curiosity. There was something unusual about a man who seemed to notice every need before it became a crisis. Near the end of the fundraiser, a teacher recognized Noah and stopped to chat. During the conversation, she casually thanked Daniel for helping several students at the elementary school repair science fair projects earlier that month. Another parent mentioned that Daniel had spent part of a Saturday fixing a wheelchair ramp for an elderly neighbor. Daniel looked mildly embarrassed by the attention and quickly changed the subject. Emily noticed that too. Most people enjoyed being praised. Daniel seemed more comfortable talking about his son than himself. As families began leaving, Emily finally introduced herself properly. The conversation was brief but warm. Daniel learned she was raising her daughter alone after several difficult years. Emily learned almost nothing about him because every question she asked somehow ended with Daniel talking about Noah instead. Yet one detail caught her attention. When Daniel reached into his jacket for his truck keys, a folded document partially slipped out. Across the top was the letterhead of a respected regional foundation. Before she could read more, he tucked it away. Whatever it was, it did not seem connected to a maintenance worker struggling to keep up with everyday bills. Outside, the parking lot had nearly emptied. Daniel and Noah walked toward their pickup truck while Emily and her daughter headed in the opposite direction. It should have been the end of the evening. Instead, as Daniel opened the driver's door, he noticed something that made him stop. Emily's daughter was crying beside their car, and whatever had happened seemed serious enough to change everything. Daniel stopped halfway into the truck and immediately walked toward Emily's car. Her daughter, Sophie, stood beside the rear passenger door with tears running down her face. One glance told him this was not a tantrum. It was panic. Emily knelt beside her daughter, trying to remain calm, but worry had already reached her eyes. "The bracelet is gone," Sophie whispered. "Mom's bracelet." Emily closed her eyes for a moment. The bracelet had belonged to her late mother. Somehow it had fallen off during the fundraiser. Without hesitation, Daniel handed his truck keys to Noah. Give me 10 minutes. Then he headed back toward the nearly empty event hall. Most people had already gone home. Chairs were stacked. Lights were being turned off. Yet Daniel methodically retraced the paths children and families had taken throughout the evening. He checked beneath tables, near the refreshment station, and along the edge of the church parking lot. 20 minutes later, he finally found the bracelet tucked beneath a folding chair near the stage. When he returned and placed it in Sophie's hand, the little girl burst into tears of relief and hugged her mother. Daniel simply smiled and wished them a safe drive home. He never mentioned that he had missed his own bedtime routine to help them. The next morning began before sunrise. Daniel sat at the kitchen table reviewing a utility bill while coffee brewed nearby. Noah prepared for school, talking enthusiastically about an upcoming science competition. Daniel listened carefully while making lunches and checking homework assignments. There was a quiet rhythm to their mornings. Responsibilities came first. Complaints rarely appeared. Outside, the pickup truck waited in the driveway beneath a fading porch light. Before leaving, Daniel opened the mailbox and sorted through bills, advertisements, and a single envelope bearing the same regional foundation logo Emily had noticed at the fundraiser. He slipped it into his jacket before Noah could ask questions. At school, Daniel waited until Noah disappeared down the school hallway before heading to work. The habit never changed. Some parents rushed away immediately. Daniel always stayed long enough to make sure his son entered safely. Later that afternoon, he spent several hours repairing heating equipment at a local diner. The owner apologized for not being able to pay immediately because business had been slow. Daniel nodded and finished the repair anyway. "Take care of it when you can," he said. The owner looked stunned. Most contractors would have refused. Daniel simply gathered his tools and left. By evening, word of the lost bracelet had quietly spread through the community. Emily found herself thinking about Daniel more than she expected. Not because he had found something valuable. Because he had treated her daughter's fear as if it mattered. Many people had noticed Emily standing alone at the fundraiser. Daniel was the only one who noticed Sophie. Meanwhile, another challenge appeared in Daniel's world. Noah's science teacher called that evening. The competition required travel expenses that many families could not easily afford. Daniel promised he would find a way. After hanging up, he sat quietly at the kitchen table beside another stack of bills. For a few moments, concern crossed his face. Then he reached for a notebook and began calculating expenses. He always looked for solutions before surrendering to worry. As he worked, the foundation envelope slipped from his jacket onto the table. Noah glanced at the logo. "Dad, is that the same organization that keeps writing to you?" Daniel quickly picked it up. Something like that. It was the first time Noah had ever seen his father avoid a direct answer. And for reasons he could not explain, the mystery surrounding that envelope suddenly felt much bigger than either of them realized. The mystery surrounding the foundation envelope lingered in Noah's mind long after the conversation ended. Daniel noticed it too. His son rarely asked questions twice, but that evening he seemed unusually curious. Daniel wanted to explain everything. He simply was not ready. Some parts of the past felt easier to carry alone. The following Saturday began with Noah's science competition workshop at the local elementary school. Families filled the parking lot while volunteers helped students prepare their projects. Daniel arrived early in his pickup truck carrying a toolbox in one hand and Noah's display board in the other. When they entered the school hallway, they discovered a problem. One of the folding presentation stands had broken, leaving a young student near tears. Before any teacher could respond, Daniel quietly knelt beside the damaged frame. Within minutes, he had repaired it using spare parts from his toolbox. The child smiled with relief. Daniel simply returned to helping Noah. Moments like that seemed natural to him. To everyone else, they felt unusual. Across town, Emily spent the morning juggling responsibilities of her own. Sophie's school fundraiser, grocery shopping, household chores, and work deadlines all competed for attention. Being a single parent often felt like solving 10 problems at once while pretending everything was fine. By early afternoon, she brought Sophie to the same school for a community family event connected to the science program. Neither she nor Daniel knew they would cross paths again so soon. The gymnasium buzzed with conversation, children, and project displays. Noah proudly explained his presentation while Sophie wandered between exhibits. At one point, a younger child accidentally knocked over part of Noah's display. Several pieces scattered across the floor. The child immediately looked terrified. Emily happened to witness the moment. So did Daniel. What happened next surprised her. Noah looked upset, but before he could react, Daniel crouched beside the frightened child and calmly helped gather the materials. "Accidents happen," he said gently. "The important thing is helping fix them." Then he and Noah rebuilt the display together. The younger child joined them. Within minutes, everyone was smiling again. Emily watched the interaction from across the room. Most adults taught kindness with words. Daniel taught it through behavior. Later, while children participated in activities, a sudden rainstorm forced everyone to move vehicles from part of the parking lot near a drainage area. Emily hurried outside with Sophie. When she reached her car, she discovered the battery had died. Several drivers passed without stopping. Some offered sympathetic looks. None stayed. Then Daniel appeared carrying a set of jumper cables from his pickup truck. "Looks like your afternoon got more complicated," he said with a small smile. 20 minutes later, the car was running again. Sophie immediately thanked him. Daniel shrugged as if it were no big deal. Yet Emily noticed something else while he packed away the cables. A folded foundation document slipped partially from his jacket pocket once again. This time she saw a line mentioning a community leadership initiative. It raised even more questions. Why would someone like Daniel receive repeated invitations from an organization that seemed to focus on leadership and regional development? The pieces still did not fit together. Before leaving, Emily thanked him for helping. Daniel nodded and glanced toward the children. Noah and Sophie were laughing together near the school entrance. "They seem to get along," Emily said. "Better than most adults," Daniel replied. For the first time they both laughed. It was a small moment, but it felt genuine. As the rain eased and families began heading home, Emily realized her first impression of Daniel had been incomplete. She originally saw a quiet man helping strangers. Now she was beginning to see a father whose kindness extended naturally to everyone around him. Yet as Daniel drove away, another thought stayed with her. Whatever secret was hidden inside those foundation letters clearly mattered. And sooner or later, she suspected she would discover why. The questions surrounding the foundation letters continued to grow, but Daniel seemed determined to keep them buried beneath everyday responsibilities. A few days after the school event, Noah came home carrying disappointing news. The science competition organizers had increased participation costs because of travel and lodging requirements. Several students were considering dropping out. Noah tried to sound mature about it, but Daniel recognized the disappointment behind his smile. That evening, after dinner, Daniel quietly reviewed household expenses at the kitchen table. Utility bills, school forms, and repair invoices formed small stacks beneath the warm light. He made notes, crossed out numbers, and recalculated. The process looked familiar. Sacrifice had become a language he spoke fluently. The next morning, before heading to work, Daniel slipped a payment envelope into the mailbox. Noah never saw that the money had originally been set aside for replacing a failing appliance in the house. Some choices were easier to make. Emily could not stop thinking about the look on Daniel's face after the conversation with the foundation representative. It was not excitement. It was not pride. It looked more like the expression of a man carrying a responsibility he was not sure he could accept. The mystery followed her through the week. Meanwhile, life continued moving forward for both families. Noah's science competition was approaching, and Daniel spent every spare evening helping him prepare. One night, after finishing a repair job at the local diner, Daniel sat beside Noah at the kitchen table reviewing presentation notes. The dishwasher still needed replacement. A utility bill remained unpaid on the counter. Yet Daniel focused entirely on his son. When Noah struggled with part of his project, Daniel patiently worked through the problem without taking over. "The answer matters less than learning how to find it," he told him. It was the kind of lesson that reached beyond science. Across town, Emily faced challenges of her own. Sophie's school had announced a parent volunteer day, but Emily's work schedule made attendance difficult. Like many single parents, she often felt guilty for not being able to be everywhere at once. On Friday afternoon, That guilt became reality when an unexpected meeting forced her to miss the event entirely. Sophie tried to be brave about it, but Emily could hear the disappointment in her voice. The next day, while helping at the school, Daniel noticed Sophie sitting quietly near the edge of the playground after most activities had ended. He learned that several parents had participated alongside their children while Sophie had spent much of the afternoon alone. Without making a production of it, Daniel invited her to help Noah finish setting up one of the science displays. Soon the two children were laughing together. By the time Emily arrived, delayed and exhausted, she found Sophie smiling again. The relief she felt was immediate. Yet the most important discovery came later. While thanking one of the teachers for watching over her daughter, Emily accidentally learned something no one had ever told her. Several years earlier, Daniel had been offered a prestigious position with a regional development organization. The role would have doubled his income and required relocating to another state. He turned it down for Noah, the teacher explained casually. His wife had passed away not long before. Noah was struggling. Daniel would not leave the support system they had built. Emily stood silent. Suddenly, pieces began fitting together. The foundation letters, the opportunities, the sacrifices. Daniel was not a man who lacked ambition. He was a man who repeatedly chose family over personal advancement. Later that evening, Emily stopped at a grocery store on her way home. As she pushed her cart toward the checkout lane, she spotted Daniel loading bags into his pickup truck. For a moment she simply watched. He looked tired. More tired than usual. Yet he was helping an elderly customer place groceries into her car before taking care of his own purchases. Some people performed kindness when others were watching. Daniel seemed unable to stop doing it even when no one noticed. When he finally saw Emily, they spoke briefly. The conversation felt easier than before. More comfortable. More honest. For the first time, Emily found herself telling him about her fears as a parent. Daniel listened without judgment. He did not offer easy answers. He simply understood. That mattered more. As they prepared to leave, a phone call interrupted the moment. Daniel glanced at the screen and immediately grew serious. The call was from the foundation. This time he answered. Emily could not hear the conversation, but she saw enough to understand one thing. Whatever decision the foundation was asking him to make had reached a turning point. And judging by the concern in his eyes, accepting it might cost him far more than anyone realized. The phone call from the foundation stayed with Daniel long after he left the grocery store parking lot. The opportunity they were offering was no longer a distant possibility. They wanted an answer. The position involved leading a regional family support initiative that would help single-parent households across several counties. It was meaningful work. Work Daniel genuinely believed in. Yet it also required travel, evening meetings, and responsibilities that could take time away from Noah. That was the part he could not ignore. Every important decision in his life eventually came back to the same question. What would it cost his son? The pressure followed him through the next week. At home, bills continued arriving in the mailbox with dependable regularity. Noah's competition expenses still needed attention. The aging dishwasher finally stopped working completely. Daniel responded the way he always did. He made lists. He adjusted schedules. He sacrificed personal needs first. Yet beneath the routine, uncertainty continued growing. Meanwhile, unexpected results from Daniel's hidden competence began appearing in places he never anticipated. During preparations for the regional science competition, organizers encountered a major problem involving display layouts and electrical requirements for dozens of student projects. Several adults spent hours debating solutions. Daniel happened to be helping Noah set up equipment when he quietly suggested a different arrangement. The adjustment solved the issue, improved safety, and reduced costs at the same time. Organizers immediately adopted the plan. What surprised people was not that he found a solution. It was how quickly he understood a complicated problem most others had struggled with. Several parents exchanged puzzled looks. A maintenance worker was not supposed to think that way. Daniel simply returned to helping Noah. He never seemed interested in proving anything. Emily happened to witness part of the situation. The more she observed, the harder it became to fit Daniel into the assumptions people made about him. He carried himself like a man who had seen much more of life than he ever discussed. A few days later, another situation deepened her curiosity. Sophie developed a severe allergic reaction during a school activity. It was not life-threatening, but it frightened her badly. Emily rushed to meet her at the nurse's office. When she arrived, she discovered Daniel already there. Noah had been the first student to notice Sophie's distress and immediately found help. Daniel had remained until Emily arrived because Sophie was scared and did not want to be alone. The moment took place inside the quiet hospital waiting room, attached to the community clinic where the school nurse had sent them for evaluation. Daniel sat nearby reading paperwork while keeping the children calm. He never acted as though his presence deserved recognition. To him, helping was simply the natural thing to do. Yet for Emily, something shifted. She began seeing not isolated acts of kindness but a pattern. Daniel consistently showed up for people, especially children, especially when nobody expected him to. Later that evening, Emily thanked him. Their conversation lasted longer than usual. For the first time, Daniel admitted that he was struggling with a difficult decision. He did not share every detail, but he acknowledged that the foundation was asking him to consider a major change. Emily listened carefully. "Whatever they see in you," she said softly, "it must be something real." Daniel smiled faintly but said nothing. The compliment seemed to make him uncomfortable. As they prepared to leave, Noah ran over carrying an envelope that had arrived earlier that day. It bore the familiar foundation logo. Daniel opened it and froze. Inside was an official deadline. He had less than 2 weeks to decide. And for the first time since the letters began arriving, he looked less worried about himself than about what the decision might mean for the family he had spent years protecting. The foundation deadline sat quietly on Daniel's kitchen table, but it seemed to grow heavier with each passing day. Noah noticed it every time he walked through the room. Daniel tried to keep life normal, focusing on school schedules, work orders, and the science competition. Yet the decision waiting for him refused to stay in the background. The opportunity could help thousands of single-parent families. It could also change the routine that had held his own family together since the darkest season of their lives. One evening, while organizing old papers needed for the foundation review, Daniel pulled several storage boxes from a closet. Noah offered to help. Neither expected the afternoon to uncover a chapter of the past Daniel rarely discussed. Among the folders and photographs sat a worn leather binder. Inside were architectural drawings, community development plans, and leadership awards. Noah stared in disbelief. "Dad, you made these?" Daniel hesitated before nodding. Years earlier, before his wife's illness and before becoming a full-time single parent, he had worked in regional community planning. The projects focused on affordable family housing, youth programs, and neighborhood support services. Many had gone on to receive state recognition. Noah flipped through page after page. "Why did you stop?" The question settled heavily between them. Daniel looked toward a framed family photograph resting on a nearby shelf. "Because your mother got sick," he answered quietly. The truth emerged slowly. During the final years of her illness, Daniel had turned down promotions, leadership opportunities, and a highly respected position that would have required extensive travel. After her passing, he made another choice. Rather than continue pursuing a growing career, he accepted maintenance work that allowed him to be present for Noah every day. School drop-offs, doctor appointments, homework, grief counseling, soccer games. The ordinary moments became his priority. Across town, Emily received an unexpected call from one of the foundation coordinators she knew through community volunteer work. During the conversation, Daniel's name surfaced. Curious, she asked a few questions. What she learned stunned her. The leadership initiative had not discovered Daniel by accident. For years, nonprofit organizations had quietly used programs and community models he helped design before stepping away from public leadership. The foundation believed he possessed a rare understanding of what struggling families actually needed, because he had lived it himself. Suddenly, the mystery surrounding the letters made sense. Daniel was not being offered an opportunity despite his current job. He was being sought because of everything he had sacrificed. Later that week, Emily met Daniel and the children at a small diner after a science workshop. Noah and Sophie quickly disappeared into a conversation about projects and school activities. Meanwhile, Emily gently asked Daniel why he had never mentioned any of his accomplishments. He smiled awkwardly. Because none of them helped me pack lunches or get Noah through losing his mother. The answer stayed with her. It explained nearly everything she had observed since the night of the fundraiser. His kindness was not separate from his past. It was the result of it. Yet even as admiration grew, a new obstacle emerged. Noah had overheard enough conversations to understand that accepting the foundation role could change their lives significantly. For the first time, uncertainty appeared in his eyes. Daniel had spent years proving he would always be there. Now a future that might require him to be somewhere else was suddenly becoming real. As they left the diner and walked toward the pickup truck beneath the glow of the parking lot lights, Daniel realized something troubling. The foundation was no longer the biggest challenge. The bigger challenge was whether the person whose trust mattered most might believe he was choosing something else over family. And that fear followed him all the way home. The fear Daniel carried home from the diner refused to leave. For years, every important promise in Noah's life had been kept. He attended every school conference, every doctor appointment, every game, every difficult conversation after the loss of Noah's mother. Being present had become more than a responsibility. It had become part of how Noah measured safety. Now, for the first time, Daniel worried that the foundation opportunity might make his son question that certainty. The following week only made things harder. The deadline was approaching, and the foundation needed a final answer. At the same time, Noah's science competition entered its final stage. The event would take place in another city, requiring travel and preparation. Daniel promised he would be there no matter what happened. Yet even as he made the promise, his schedule continued filling with meetings connected to the foundation. One afternoon, a coordinator asked him to attend an important planning session. Daniel immediately declined because it conflicted with Noah's competition schedule. The coordinator seemed surprised. Daniel simply explained that his son came first. Still, the conflict lingered. Word eventually reached Noah through conversations at school. Several adults openly discussed how Daniel might soon lead a major regional initiative. In the school hallway, one student casually joked that Noah would probably never see his father because important people were always busy. The comment was careless, but it landed exactly where Noah was most vulnerable. By the time Daniel arrived to pick him up after school, something had changed. Noah was quieter than usual. The drive home in the pickup truck felt strangely distant. That evening, Daniel found him sitting alone on the back porch. "You can tell me what's wrong," Daniel said gently. Noah stared at the yard for several seconds. "If you take the job, are things going to change?" The question hurt because it was honest. Daniel sat beside him and tried to explain that he had not made any decision. But uncertainty has a way of sounding like confirmation when someone is afraid. For the first time in years, Noah did not seem reassured. Meanwhile, Emily noticed changes as well. Sophie excitedly talked about future plans involving both families, but Emily found herself worried. She understood opportunities. She also understood how easily children could feel abandoned, even when adults had good intentions. One evening, after stopping at a grocery store, she unexpectedly saw Daniel sitting alone in his truck long after everyone else had left. He was not checking his phone. He was not reviewing documents. He simply sat there in silence. The sight stayed with her. The man everyone admired for being strong suddenly looked exhausted. The emotional pressure finally reached its breaking point 2 days later. Noah's competition presentation was scheduled for Saturday morning. Late Friday afternoon, the foundation called again. A final leadership meeting had been moved unexpectedly to the same day. Attendance was strongly encouraged. Daniel listened quietly before declining. The decision should have brought relief. Instead, it created a new problem. Several foundation representatives began questioning whether he was serious about accepting the position at all. The opportunity he had spent weeks considering suddenly seemed to be slipping away. That night, Daniel sat alone at the kitchen table surrounded by unopened mail, utility bills, and foundation paperwork. Upstairs, Noah remained in his room. Neither slept well. The opportunity to help thousands of families seemed within reach. The trust of the one person who mattered most felt increasingly fragile. And by morning, Daniel would face a choice that appeared impossible to survive without losing something precious. Yet neither he nor Noah knew that a conversation already happening behind the scenes was about to reveal the truth of who Daniel really was, and why the foundation had been pursuing him for so long. Saturday morning arrived with the weight of every unfinished decision Daniel had been carrying for weeks. The foundation meeting and Noah's science competition were scheduled only hours apart. Yet Daniel never hesitated. Before sunrise, he loaded Noah's project materials into the pickup truck and drove toward the competition venue. Whatever happened with the foundation could wait. His son could not. Noah sat quietly during most of the drive. The uncertainty between them still lingered. But when Daniel helped him unload the display and carefully checked every detail one last time, something began to change. He was here, just as he had always been. Inside the convention center, families, teachers, and judges moved between rows of student exhibits. Noah delivered his presentation with confidence. Daniel stood near the back, offering an encouraging smile whenever their eyes met. The moment felt ordinary. Yet it represented years of choices nobody else had seen. While the competition continued, a separate conversation was unfolding at the foundation meeting Daniel had declined to attend. Several board members questioned whether someone who repeatedly prioritized family obligations could effectively lead a regional initiative. Then an unexpected voice spoke up. It belonged to a longtime community director who had worked with Daniel years earlier. One by one, others joined. They shared stories about the housing programs he designed, the family support systems he helped create, and the opportunities he sacrificed after his wife's illness. The truth became impossible to ignore. Daniel's greatest qualification was not his leadership experience. It was the fact that he had lived the struggles the organization hoped to address. By midday, Noah's project earned recognition for both creativity and community impact. As father and son walked toward the parking lot, Noah finally stopped. "Dad, can I ask you something?" Daniel nodded. Noah took a deep breath. "If you take the foundation job, would you still come to things like this?" The question carried months of fear. Daniel answered without hesitation. "I would never accept any opportunity that asked me to stop being your father." For a moment, neither spoke. Then Noah smiled for the first time in days. "I think I knew that. I just needed to hear it." The emotional distance that had been growing between them finally disappeared. Later that afternoon, Daniel checked his phone and discovered multiple messages from the foundation. Expecting disappointment, he returned the call from a quiet corner of a diner where he and Noah had stopped for lunch. Instead, the foundation director surprised him. The board had voted unanimously to restructure the position around his recommendations. Travel requirements would be limited. Family flexibility would be built into the role. The reason was simple. They no longer wanted him despite his priorities. They wanted him because of them. His commitment to family was exactly what made him the right person for the job. Daniel sat silently for several seconds. Across the table, Noah watched his expression carefully. For the first time, relief replaced uncertainty. The outcome had not come from luck. It had come from years of consistent choices. Years of showing up. Years of placing people before personal advancement. That evening, a community celebration was held at the same church parking lot, where one of the story's misunderstandings had occurred weeks earlier. Families gathered, children played, and volunteers shared updates about local projects. During the event, the foundation publicly announced Daniel's new leadership role. Then something unexpected happened. Parents, teachers, neighbors, and community members began sharing stories. The repaired science projects. The meals delivered quietly. The rides given to struggling families. The encouragement offered during difficult seasons. Story after story revealed the same pattern. Daniel had spent years helping people without asking for recognition. The crowd gradually fell silent as the full picture emerged. Nearby, Noah listened with tears in his eyes. For the first time, he saw his father through the eyes of everyone else. Not as a man who gave up opportunities, as a man who transformed them into something more meaningful. Emily stood beside Sophie, equally moved. She finally understood what had drawn her attention on the night of the fundraiser. It was never a single act of kindness. It was character. Quiet, steady, dependable character. Later, as the evening ended and families drifted home, Emily thanked Daniel for being exactly who he was. No grand declarations followed. None were needed. Trust had already been built. Respect had already taken root. The future remained unwritten, but it no longer felt lonely. As Daniel and Noah walked toward their pickup truck beneath the fading sunset, father and son shared a comfortable silence. The same mailbox would still receive bills. Life would still bring challenges, but something important had been healed. The fear of losing what mattered most had been replaced by certainty. Real strength is not measured by titles, recognition, or success. It is measured by the people who know they can depend on you. And in the end, Daniel Carter's greatest achievement was not the opportunity he accepted. It was the family he never stopped choosing.